Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kamla, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. All attendees will be muted during the presentation. I will be monitoring the chat window, so feel free to comment or ask any questions. We will address your questions at the end of the presentation. I'd like to introduce Jason Brownell, our Director of Engineering here at Polyfuse Graphics, and Tim Debus, the President of the Reusable Packaging Association. Let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Kamla. Yes, I will be bringing Tim in just a few moments so that we can have our discussion. As Kamla said, I am the Director of Engineering here at Polyfuse Graphics and Molding Graphics Corporation. And in order to kind of really understand this discussion and what's going on, I just wanted to take a quick moment to run over polymer fusion labeling and explain kind of what it is and how it's different. And I think it'll make more sense when we get into the discussion. So bear with me 1 second here. So when we talk about polymer fusion labeling, we are specifically talking about the polyolefin family of plastic. So this is going to include all of your polyethylenes. It's going to include polypropylene, even like talc-filled, glass-filled polypropylene. It's also going to include like soft touch type material like TPV. Okay, so it's really related to the polyolefin family of plastics and durable goods. Now, those materials themselves, they have a challenge with trying to label them. And the first challenge is the fact that it's very low surface energy. It's very hard to stick to or adhere to because of that. In fact, if you were to look at it on a scale, the surface energy, which is in dynes per centimeter, is very similar to Teflon, which of course we coat our cookware with Teflon so that things don't stick to it. Again, so that's one of the first and foremost challenges of trying to decorate polyethylene and polypropylene. Next, especially items that are in an outdoor environment, they're constantly expanding and contracting. And I often say it's kind of like putting an adhesive bandage over your knuckle. It's fine as long as everything is flat, but as soon as you start flexing it, it has a tendency to want to come off. And then of course, if you add moisture to the equation, then it's definitely going to come off. So anyway, the expansion and contraction of polyethylene and polypropylene is very much a challenge when you're trying to adhere to it. And we don't adhere to it either, and I'll explain here in a moment. And then last up, you have outgassing. If you have ever seen like a sticker that has bubbles and blisters underneath it, that could be related to that outgassing. So again, that's another challenge with those type of materials. So to understand kind of how we're different, let's real quick go over some of the traditional methods that are out there. First up, just a good old-fashioned sticker. If you look at the construction of it, typically you'll have like a clear coat and then ink and then a substrate that has adhesive on it. And again, because of the expansion and contraction and the low surface energy of polyethylene and polypropylene, you can certainly have issues with a traditional pressure sensitive adhesive label. Next up would be hot stamping foil. To this, I would also add pad printing or screen printing. Again, you have an adhesive based ink trying to adhere to a material that nothing wants to stick to. Next up is a heat transfer. It's put on with a piece of equipment very similar to Polyfuse. If you look at the construction though, it is different. Typically you will have a clear coat followed by a layer of ink, and then you have that adhesive layer coming in contact with the plastic part. But again, because it's adhesive based, it can have challenges with polyethylene and polypropylene. And then last up is an in-mold label. Now, in-mold labels do a really good job of mechanically bonding to the surface of polyethylene and polypropylene. It's that tie layer that mechanically bonds. However, if you look at the rest of the construction of it, typically it's clear coat on top followed by a layer of ink. And if that clear coat breaks down for any particular reason, then that exposes the ink, and then the ink can go away. So at the end of the day, you're left kind of with the substrate and some of the printing is gone. Um, so we are involved in durable goods, things that have 10, 15-year life cycles. And this slide kind of says it all because what we are actually manufacturing is a label that is made out of polymers. It's plastic. And we're taking that plastic label, we're putting it in contact with the plastic part, and then using heat, we're reaching the melt temperature of the label. We are reaching the melt temperature of the skin of the plastic. And because the two are the same material, they actually fuse together to become one piece of plastic, if that makes sense. This is just a really quick snapshot of our test data. This is certainly available, and we have it available in a long form where you can kind of see before and after photographs from pressure wash testing to flex testing to chemical testing. In fact, when you get down to the chemical section, these are not chemical wipes or mist. They're actually soaking in these materials for hours and hours on end with no degradation. Okay, so it is available, and certainly after this, if you want to make contact, we can provide that to you. So people come to us for a lot of different reasons. Of course, brand recognition is probably one of the biggest because branding is very important to understand, who this material belongs to, who this pallet or tote or crate belongs to. So branding is very important. A lot of people don't understand that we can actually incorporate antimicrobial properties to the label, especially things that are, maybe going into the medical field where antimicrobial properties may be some sort of a requirement. So that is something that we can add to that. Authentication and anti-counterfeiting. We actually have the ability to put tiny, tiny little particles that then, even in a ground up form, can be identified later. And so if you're in a situation where maybe there's plastic theft going on, you can even identify it when it's been ground up for recycling. So that will help prosecutors and teams that are going in trying to combat this problem. So again, just something to make everybody aware of. Track and trace is very important to us and to our customers. We certainly can do, QR codes, barcodes, serialization, and we are recently offering RFID, and we'll touch more on that here in a little bit. So again, track and trace. Safety and warning, a lot of people come to us for warnings or instructional panels. And so this is very important that if you have a warning that needs to be there on the life of this particular part, this is something with polymer fusion labeling that you can achieve for the life of the part. And then lastly, sustainability. Because the polymer fusion label itself is polymer based and it becomes part of the polyethylene or polypropylene part, it can then be ground up and it is 100% recyclable at the end of life. So again, thank you very much for allowing me just a quick amount of time to kind of explain our technology. Again, it is a polymer-based label that we are melting into the surface of the plastic. So with that having been said, I would like to welcome Mr. Tim Debus. He is the CEO and president of the Reusable Packaging Association. Tim, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason, and great way to start the webinar. Just seeing visually, pictures worth 1,000 words, right? And you can see
For
the
sure.
opportunity at hand here with the polyfuse labeling. So thanks for arranging this education session. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And we and our audience is certainly looking forward to understanding a little bit about the Reusable Packaging Association. Do you call it RPA for short sometimes?
We do, for sure. There's some other RPAs out there, but anything related to packaging, supply chains, generally that'll be the Reusable Packaging Association. And it's been a acronym that we've used for about 15 years, actually. The organization itself was founded as a coalition under a different name back in 1999. So 20 plus years been around promoting reusable packaging systems in the supply chain and going by the Reusable Packaging Association since about 2007. So it's got a nice long history to the organization, and the RPA works just fine. And most of the people I think in our industry now can identify us accordingly.
Great. Yeah. My fear was that, I would say RPA instead of Reusable Packaging Association, and people might be confused. So thank you for the clarification there. So how does RPA, like as an organization, serve the industry? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. We're a company based nonprofit trade organization. Our member companies really are involved in the manufacturing, the supply, the use, and the services to reusable packaging systems in the marketplace, particularly the movement or transport of goods from a business to business network setting. And I emphasize the services because that definitely is a growing area within our industry, as we do emphasize also systems approach for reusable packaging. And so there's a tremendous amount of professional services in the way that reusable packaging products are moved and handled, maintained, repaired, washed, all sorts of different things that ultimately make them effective reusable packaging. So our member companies join the organization and really collaborate for us to do our mission, which is to promote the reuse and value of reusable packaging systems. As noted, we do focus on the supply chain, more B2B reusable packaging, but more and more we find that there's relevancy to consumer packaging, primary packaging with B2C distribution. Everything that we've learned and everything that we've practiced over decades in the supply chain is also very applicable to engaging reusable packaging to consumers. And so we find ourselves a lot looking at how the B2B marketplace of reuse can continue to flourish, but then also support more B2C reusable packaging programs that many entrepreneurs are getting behind now, seeing opportunities with reuse. The service that we provide to members is really leveraging that collaboration to raise awareness about the opportunities with reuse. And we do that through a variety of different core programs, including trade shows and educations, committees where our members come together and it serves as a forum for industry discussion, work on projects together that's going to elevate the industry. We do marketing and communications, a variety of different podcasts and blog posts, for example, and then government affairs. That continues to be a growing area of our work as far as taking our collective voice on behalf of the reusable packaging industry and informing policymakers about what reusable packaging really is and how best policy can support reuse in the marketplace. So there's quite a bit of channels that we're involved in serving the industry, and it all is established or rooted in the fact that our members work together for the common prosperity of our business.
Sure. Well, that was actually one of the questions that I had. Weren't you recently testifying?
Yeah.
As regards to plastics?
Yeah,
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, clarifying a good way, testifying for very educational purposes
Okay.
to the U.S. Senate Environment and Public Works Committee last month, actually. It
Gotcha.
was a hearing that the committee put on to really look at reuse and refill strategies as a way to tackle or combat the problems associated with single-use or solid waste. And it was a terrific forum for us to engage with policymakers at the highest level in the U.S. Federal government to talk about the advantages of reusable packaging and how reuse and refill models can very much serve as one part of the solution to help combat solid waste generation, rising pollution, and other environmental, problems out there that we're looking to fix as a society. One of the key messages, though, that I was communicating is that reuse is every bit a part of economic growth and creating new value in the marketplace. And so reuse is not just about addressing, say, environmental problems associated with single-use waste, but also to help grow the economies that decouples from resource consumption. For example, that you can, through reuse, continue to add value and create new business opportunity and grow your market that is not dependent on the constant use of raw materials. And
Sure.
that's the exciting part of reuse. And one of the key messages that we have to the government is that it's fine to look at reuse to address some of the environmental ills out there, but also look at the bigger picture and look at how reuse can help grow new economies, provide new jobs and services that could be very advantageous to communities, to businesses out there. And it's that combined economic and environmental opportunity that is very exciting about our industry.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for doing that on everybody's behalf and helping to educate. So thank you very much for that. Um, can you explain a little bit how like labeling, marketing, or marking and branding, how that's being used for reusable transport containers?
Very much so. It's kind of an under discussed topic within our industry. And this is where this webinar and other education events where we can talk about labeling and marking and branding becomes so important because there's been tremendous evolution and technology advancements in those capabilities over the years. I really see that there's three physical, say, representations with reusable packaging related to labeling and identifying or marking on products. And you mentioned one at the onset, and that's ownership. Possession of the item, branding, for example, is a way to really distinguish who owns these reusable packaging assets. And it's not just important from branding and marketing and engagement with your customers, but it also serves for sortation. For example, if you've got hundreds or thousands of crates or containers or bottles or trays, let's say that having that physical representation of a brand, helps for sorting products and getting them back to in the right place. So it's very much is an important attribute in the infrastructure of being able to retrieve and ultimately return reusable packaging products. The second physical representation is more about instructions. And you mentioned safety instructions, which would be a good example. But with reusable packaging, especially with plastic-based products, you can have instructions that are actually molded or embedded within the physical product itself. It could be a born-on date, for example.
Sure.
It could be a symbol that represents what type of plastic it is for recycling purposes. And in many cases that you can actually in-mold instructions related to the return of the asset, where you're saying, if you find this, call this number, this 1-800 number, and we'll work with you to return to that physical packaging product, whether it's a container or a pallet. And so instructions become very important as a permanent part of the reusable packaging product, and having the integrity of those instructions lasting over, say, dozens of uses, multiple years, that becomes very important, so that there's continuity, I think, in the instructions from the very first use of a product all the way to its last use. And I think the third area that is important is, for labeling especially, is content. What's inside of that container, or what's writing with that pallet, for example. But if it's a tote, if it's a container or tray, and it's actually carrying goods, there's oftentimes legal obligations as to a physical identification of net weight, contents, say active ingredients, let's say, or other features that need to be disclosed to the handler, that becomes very important. And so you have basically the ownership and branding. You've got instructions, but then also the contents of what's in that container. And one distinction, which is important, is the contents in many applications, especially in supply chain reusable systems, the contents are changing. So that's more of a temporary labeling basis in which you need to be able to adhese or to affix the label to the container, but then also get it off. And that lends itself to really, I think, two common characteristics of labeling and marketing. Is one that you want to have your product returned. I mean, that ultimately is the definition of reusable product. And so anything that you can do to help facilitate retrieving, the collection, and the return of the asset is a very important part of labeling and branding. But
Sure.
the second one is, and it's a lot trickier in the industry, is a sense of clean, or a sense of newness to the container, that as you utilize the product over time, you want it looking to be clean and new and fresh after years of use. And that's where the importance of quality of labeling and the ability to get temporary labels off your containers becomes that much important, so that your 50th use of the container or tote looks like it was when it was first rolled off the production line. And
Sure.
that's a constant moving objective that we have in our industry. And when you have new technologies and labeling and branding, it only helps the industry meet those objectives.
For sure, for sure. And I know you've worked with, other members of our organization. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been, with Polyfuse and kind of the polymer fusion technology?
Well, sure. I will admit that every time I see it, whether it's on a product live or in a picture, it's very impressive because of the quality, the distinction of the logos, the color capabilities, but also the physical evidence of the labeling itself, where it is infused within the product. It's not something that you can scratch off. It's not something that's going to roll off by way of temperature, humidity, or other climate conditions that could wear and tear the label. That it truly is a permanent fixture, but it's part of the product. As you noted, it's part of it's a plastic, a poly-based adhesion of the label within the structure of the polyolefin produced container and tray. And so that really is what stands out the most, is that it's actually part of the product rather than something that is affixed after production, let's say. And that becomes a very important distinction to me, to meet those objectives I talked about earlier, but it maintained that quality. And that is something that I'll underscore here again, is with reusable packaging, these are designed to last a long time. And so how can we have appearance of reusable packaging products that years down the line is going to be maintained as if it's looking new, as if it is working effectively in the current conditions, and be able to meet that lasting purpose that reusable packaging products have. So when I see it on other RPA member products, when I see it in the marketplace, even on non-packaging goods, that you have many examples of, it's always prompts thinking through about how this could be used in more applications for pallets and bins and trays and crates, throughout our industry.
Absolutely. I know I drive my wife nuts sometimes when we're traveling because I'm like, oh, that's us. That's us. So yeah, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. And we certainly don't fall into the category of, temporary or removable labeling. But certainly when it comes to the other items that you mentioned, like, who does this belong to? The property of, as far as instructions, those are certainly things that can be there for the life of the part.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say I don't know if it's a disease or not when you're in this business, but you walk into a store. My wife, for example, would look at the merchandise. I'll look at the packaging and perhaps try and get a peek in the back of the store and see what's being moved out there. So it's nice balancing the time. But yeah, no question about it. Looking at how packaging has been utilized in stores and other merchandise and other capabilities is something that does sink in. So I share that with you.
Sure. That's funny. I talked earlier when we were going through the slide presentation about sustainability and recyclability at the end of life for the product. How important do you see that as far as the industry is concerned?
It's very important, and it's becoming more so because when you look at intentions or goals of, say, being more circular or fits within a circular economy, it's about the management of products, but also materials. It's about basically designing out waste from your systems,
Sure.
from your commerce. Let's say it's about trying to keep products and materials at the highest value, at the highest point for as long as possible. And so we talk a lot about product extension, product utility, and that's an area of distinction between products and materials. But at the end of the day, our products then do convert back into materials, and we want to be able to utilize 100% of the inherent, say, plastic resin in this case, into new products. And it's keeping those materials in that full circularity and maintaining that value. And so after the products, say, in their life or in their utility, that you're able to capture 100% of that product material and bring it into new manufacture. And so in able to do that, all of the characteristics of the product have to be able to be recyclable and put into recycled systems in which that recycled material can then be used to produce new manufacture of products. And so when you look at the sustainability of the container or tote, that includes anything that, say, is a labeling or a marking or some kind of decorative to that product asset. And so that's an area with sustainability that continues to be very important, as we want to utilize 100% of the material for continued life and use, not just the product in itself. And so sustainability from that sense of whole cycle utilization of that material and products becomes very important.
For sure. For sure. For sure. Um, can can you think of any other technologies that are out there that's kind of redefining the reusable packaging space that we haven't already
Very
kind
much
of
so.
touched on?
Yeah, we're in a very much of a new frontier with the technology enablement with reusable packaging systems. And I mentioned earlier about how we should spend more time with labeling, marking, and branding capabilities, because we find ourselves today talking about all of the new and exciting tools associated with technologies. And this would include being able to have complete visibility of your assets and the use of those in the marketplace, whether it's transmitting data through RFID or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or other data transmission capabilities, and storing data in the cloud that you can pull up and see real time the movement and the identification of your products. It's tremendously exciting, and we're seeing some great movements about how the capability can be driving new value, can be driving new capabilities and performance of reusable products. And so that's an area that we're right at the cusp of seeing an explosion in the way that this type of technology can be applied for identifying, monitoring, and tracking reusable packaging assets. And so we do, as an association, spend a lot of time looking at the advancements in technology technologies. One example is a few weeks ago, we published a white paper on asset technologies. And this was actually a second version from a 2019 publication. And just the difference between, say, 3-4 years in writing just shows the leap that has taken place. And you can access that white paper on our website at reusables.org. And including in that white paper is labeling. So there's a whole section on labeling and some of the newest technologies associated with that. So as we do spend time looking at the future and how reusable packaging has so much promise in the use of technology, that does include the capabilities in manufacturing that does consist of product labeling, product marking, and decorating as well. And so that's an area that we want to make sure we continue to talk about. And I think the second area, Jason, with technology is automation. Automation in terms of robotic handling, fitting within infrastructures and warehouses that are automation based, and how reusable packaging works so well, being very precise with their specifications and dimensions, working with very tight standards in which a robot or an automated equipment needs to operate. And here's again another one where I think labeling and identification becomes so important, because as optical imaging is oftentimes a part of automation, having that line of sight, having the ability to read a container or a pallet becomes that much more important. And so the quality of labeling, the quality of marking, is even enhanced then in being able to meet into these automated systems. So technology to me is one of the more exciting areas of our industry, is taking something that is a pallet crate and tote and making it smart and connected. And now all of a sudden it becomes an asset that has communication capabilities to it, and communicating information to the users that can be very powerful in terms of managing not only that physical asset, but the contents inside in terms of inventory management as well. And so these are things that as an association, we're real excited about, being at the forefront of education and raising awareness about these opportunities.
For sure. Yeah, and I mentioned earlier in the slide presentation that we are bringing RFID, a polymer fusion version of RFID, to the industry, because we've kind of seen it appears to be a gap, because you have adhesive-based RFIDs, and again, challenges with adhesive and polyolefin materials. And then, on the other side, you kind of have the really heavy duty encapsulated type. And so to have something that could integrate into the polymer matrix of the RFID seems to be really important to the industry. Anything you'd like to add on that?
No question about it. You're basically streamlining maybe it's the device. You're actually embedding it directly within the manufacturer of the product, its capability of transmitting information. And so that is another step forward. And it really, Jason, it's a good example, just year over year, looking at the advancements and innovation within our industry that makes reusable packaging such an exciting place to be. And so it's a good example, and one that I look forward to seeing firsthand and learning more about how now you can have polyfusion, but then technology fusion as well, associated with the reusable packaging product. It's one thing when you look at, and I mentioned how long at least the organization has been with the industry and how the industry's been, but even all the inventory of product 10, 20 years ago that's still being used today in the marketplace. Many of them do not and have not taken advantage of this technology that exists today. But what we're going to continue to see, of course, over time, is that those products will eventually be recycled and replaced into new manufacture. And all of the new manufacture today can take advantage of these technologies that we're talking about. And so it is a transition. You're not going to overnight have all of a sudden, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of containers out there, smart and connected. But over time, that's what we're doing in terms of new manufacture, new production, and perhaps taking older inventory out and making new inventory that does have and taking advantage of these types of technology capabilities.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's amazing that it seems like more and more reasons come up for RFID. The first one, of course, is the speed at taking inventory. Rather than going handheld one by one when you can walk into a space, or when a vehicle drives in to a warehouse, to be able to capture that data. I mean, it's so quick. So it's pretty amazing.
One of the things that really is a big departure with the innovation is it used to be, RFID would require a reader or a portal, whether it was a handheld scanner or you had to move it through a gateway within a loading dock, and it would pick up the antenna, would pick out the signals and record it. What we're seeing now with the advances of technology is the fact that these types of signals can be captured outside of a physical infrastructure like a warehouse or facility. Whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's connecting to other transmitters, we're building networks out, and we see this as consumers with our cell phone and wireless, signal and Wi-Fi capabilities. That we can also apply those advancements where the act of recording and transmitting data is no longer limited to a line of sight or a portal that you have to interact with in moving your products. That your products could be in a cargo container moving down the highway, and now you've got capabilities to be able to detect and read that in motion, and use maps to be able to see it, and then of course predict where it's going in terms of a route. What time is it going to arrive, so you can plan the receipt and ultimately the turnaround of those assets. And so in predictive analysis, now all of a sudden your operations and handling of those reusable packaging products become an area of importance as you work to manage the inventory.
For sure. Yep, absolutely. And it's important to note that tag, that um, technology needs to stay in contact with the asset in order to gain, some of these advantages, for sure. Well, we have Pack Expo coming up here in just 2 weeks. Certainly pleased to be part of RPA's technical discussion. Can you tell us a little bit about the event and why some of the audience might want to attend?
Sure. Pack Expo is an annual show that is the largest trade fair of packaging in general, packaging machines, equipment. Every year, they'll attract 30, 40,000 attendees from all over the world. It's the largest packaging fair in North America, likely the world in itself, dedicated to all things packaging. And for over 10 years, we've partnered with the show to have a reusable packaging presence. And we have basically established a pavilion where our members can exhibit in a common area. So as attendees are at the show, they can head right to our area and see the latest and greatest of reusable packaging products and services. You could walk a couple aisles and put together a reusable packaging program. And it's not just physical products of pallets and containers and bins on display, but the service side and the technology providers will also be there to look at things like labeling and added enhancements to your reusable packaging system. And so that is the anchor where we'll have this year in Las Vegas in 2 weeks, 40 of our members exhibiting with all different products to showcase. But the other area of our show is adjacent to the pavilion is an education program where for 2 days, Monday the 11th and Tuesday the 12th of September, we're running a live education program that's presentations and panel discussions all about different facets, different areas of reusable packaging. And it is really the only place, I think, in the world where you have this much attention and focus on reusable packaging, or this much consolidation of experts in the reusable packaging field to be able to touch and feel and see innovations, but then also learn from experiences and case studies from the experts who are out performing reusable packaging every day. So we have our anchor program. It's kind of the flagship reusable packaging program at Pack Expo every year. This show is coming up in 2 weeks, as you noted, and we're very excited to be able to, again, showcase to the world reusable packaging, but then also use the theater that we build for education purposes. And it really becomes the event of the year where you can learn and discover the most about reusable packaging. So thanks for bringing that up. It's obviously right around the corner for us, and we're very excited about the show this year.
As are we. We will be displaying there, and like I said, be part of that panel discussion. And so we're very excited to be attending. We're kind of getting towards the end of things here. We're going to open it up for a Q&A session. Is there any final thoughts, Tim, that you would like to add?
Well, likely just in terms of the organization, we continue to grow. Membership is the lifeblood of the organization. We invite companies and even individuals to consider joining RPA. We have several different membership categories, including this year, first ever is an individual membership. So generally speaking, companies can qualify for membership being a part of the reusable transport packaging market. Supplying, using, providing services too. There are some qualifications there, but we recognize the work that we're doing can touch and improve what people are doing even in the consumer packaging space. And so if you're an academic, a student, actually we have free membership for students. We're definitely looking to grow that area so that our programs can have access, or I should say that individuals can have access to our programs in being a part of the RPA ecosystem and promoting reusable packaging. So a lot of membership opportunities, companies, if you're involved in our business, individuals, if you have even a professional or an academic interest in our industry, look at our website at reusables.org, and you can find ways to get connected, to network, and ultimately be part of the organization.
Excellent. Well, thank you for all that you do, for sure. Okay, that having been said, Ms. Kamla, our moderator, you've been monitoring kind of the chat window, and was just curious what kind of questions folks have.
Absolutely. There actually are quite a few great comments on the webinar itself, so please take a look at those. There's some great information in there. And I also did a couple of questions popped up. One, how are the labels actually fused to the part, and can it be automated?
It absolutely can be. So here at Molden Graphics and Polyfuse, we have some different technologies, and all of them involve heat. And so one way they can be applied in the rotational molding space is actually in the mold. And then you pour in your resin, it goes into a 550-degree oven. That's your heat source then for melting the resin, melting the polymer fusion labeling, and the two fuse together to become one that way. There is another method, we often see this in rotational molding and blow molding, where they are being applied with a shrink wrap torch, depending on volume. That would be your heat source. And then lastly, they can be put on with a traditional hot stamp or a heat transfer machine, where you're using a silicone rubber die running at about 550 degrees Fahrenheit, When that dye comes in contact with the plastic label, it quickly reaches the melt temperature of the label. It reaches the melt temperature of the skin of the plastic. And because the two are the same material, they fuse together to become one. And all of this happens in about 2 or 3 seconds. And so from that standpoint, yes, there are lots of companies that are using automation to load and unload a part. Sometimes it's just to load a part and then there's auto eject coming off the machine. But yes, it can certainly be automated.
Thank you. Another question is, my part has a lot of sink marks. Will your label technology still work?
It can, but we need to address those sink marks. Sink marks are very predictable, and if you don't address it through the use of a dye that actually has that reverse image, if you will, of the sink mark, then the label itself will want to bridge over that sink mark, and that can be an issue. But yeah, if you incorporate the dye and the sink mark to match, then you can push the label right down into that sink mark and still get the fusion properties. So absolutely, a lot of products that we help people with labeling do in fact have sink marks in them. So great question though.
I have 2 more.
Okay.
Can the labels be made FDA compliant?
Absolutely. Again, we're not using ink. We are using pigmented polymers, and we can certainly source materials that would be FDA compliant. We deal with a lot of compliances from, CPSIA to ROHS, and FDA being one of them. So, no, another great question.
And then I have one more. This one is in regards to RFID. It says, on RFID, you mentioned speed of taking inventory. What other benefits do you see from RFID?
Great question.
Maybe Tim might have, he's smiling over there. Maybe he
Yeah,
has
Tim, you want to field that one?
I immediately thought of several things.
Absolutely.
For sure. And RFID is the mechanism to access or to receive data, right? It's transmitting information about the actual physical asset. And that could be, again, information about the contents. It could be information about the physical asset itself. RFID and other capabilities that can be added on include, temperature monitoring, shock and vibration. So that type of transmission of data that RFID could provide is not just identifying information about the asset or the contents inside, but the condition in which that container or that physical asset is being utilized throughout its use. And the other thing, of course, is visibility, or having the chance to locate. As location becomes such a significant part of operating a reusable packaging pool, understanding not only where your product is, where it's going, but the timing behind it as well, because you're ultimately managing the flow of assets to be able to maintain the intended purpose, the business of packaging. So that data capture becomes significant. Now, with that visibility, all of a sudden now you can safeguard your assets. You can keep them in the intended rotations or the intended cycles, that if they escape, whether they get lost out in the marketplace, you can identify where they are and bring them back. That saves the need to having to replace a lot of assets that may get lost or lose outside the gaps of a cycle, for example, and keep them into its intended operation. So you're able to save money in terms of ultimately the number of products that you need to replenish with to keep that same pool and inventory alive. The other thing that's very powerful is what is pool velocity or speed in managing the assets. The more number of rotations or uses or trips, a lot of acronyms for reusable packaging, or a lot of words that can be applied, that the more economically viable and the beneficial it is. The number of uses and the timing of uses. So if you're able to move your assets quickly, not only for its packaging purpose, but then getting them back for reuse, that saves a lot of money. That actually has more efficient or optimal utilization of your pool of assets. And that drives down costs on a per asset basis. So there's a lot of economic reasons why having that visibility, that that performance by having data to understand where your product is, how fast is it moving, becomes a very critical factor in ultimately having an efficient or optimal pool in managing those assets. So just from a standpoint of leveraging your reusable packaging, having that real-time data that RFID can provide becomes an invaluable tool in really maximizing the economic capabilities of your reusable packaging products.
For sure. Agreed. Yeah, because I was thinking about, you were talking about loss prevention. I think about like chargebacks to the customer, when things are lost. I think about things like recalls that happen that might be involved in the agricultural industry. To be able to understand where it came from, could be invaluable as well. So yeah,
Well,
ton.
yeah, Jason, thanks for bringing up all those other benefits too, having that real-time data capture and information sharing. The one thing overall is it also builds trust within your supply chain. Because now you've got real world record of a product's history, of a product's utility in the marketplace. And you can work with your supply chain partners and sharing that information so that everybody's got transparency on the movement of those goods, and therefore building trust from that visibility. No longer do we need to have paper records or saying, hey, yeah, I saw that container. It was in this warehouse on this day. Well, now you can actually have physical evidence to be able to demonstrate that. And I think that bodes well for everybody involved in the trade of moving cargo in a supply chain. That becomes very powerful. That enables, I think, the performance of reuse to reach different levels of value for its users.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for diving into that one with us. Kamala, any other questions?
No, that was all for all of the questions. Thank you so much. I'm excited, and hopefully a lot of our audience will go to your website and learn more about becoming an RPA member. So thank you so much, Tim.
And that was reusables.org, correct?
Reusables.org. Yes, thank
Perfect.
you so much. And a lot of activity going on there. I mentioned the white paper. We've got more papers in nearing publication. We just launched our Excellence in Reusable Packaging Award winners this year. And of course, we've got a tremendous program as noted in 2 weeks. So a lot of activities going on in our industry. It's a very exciting time. I want to thank the folks from Polymer Fusion and Polymer Graphics and the chance to work with you guys as members and support this type of education program. I really appreciate being able to provide this level of insight and share some of the exciting technologies and labeling and branding and marketing out there for our products.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for joining us and promoting it the way that you have. So look forward to seeing you here in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And let us know if you have any questions for Tim, reusable.org. And we're at polyfuse.com. So please feel free to reach out to any one of our team members. Thanks again for joining us today. Bye-bye.